You wake before dawn, as the stars begin to blink out over the Nile. Your linens are damp with the chill of the desert morning, and there's already a servant hovering nearby with a bronze mirror and a bowl of milk water for your face. It weighs more than your dignity, and you'll have to wear it all morning while pretending your spine isn't about to betray you in front of several priests, 3 governors, and a goose. You are Pharaoh, after all, or at least you're supposed to be. Today's going to test that theory. Your head aches. That's probably the falcon crown. Here's your cheeky warning. You probably won't make it through this day without at least 2 ceremonies, 1 awkward political marriage proposal, and a brief existential crisis involving a crocodile statue. Every surface gleams. The scent of lotus oil hangs in the air like a polite warning. Slaves fan you, scribes bow, and somewhere in the distance, someone is already arguing about grain taxes. Before we get into it, a soft reminder to like and subscribe to Boring History for Sleep. We whisper through the weirdest corners of the past, so you can dream like a scribe in the Library of Alexandria. Either way, you nod solemnly while someone sprinkles sacred water on your knees. Your advisors drone on about border skirmishes. One uses the word papyrus shortage, and suddenly everyone panics. They were carved wooden headrests that made sleep feel more like balancing your skull on a miniature bookshelf. And comment below, where are you listening from, and what time is it right now? The meeting is paused. This is now sacred. No one moves. You try not to bounce. Royalty should glide, not jiggle. Your ceremonial sandals are too tight. Your food taster is suspiciously sweaty, and you've just been told you must bless a new girl with your presence, your words, and yes, your dancing. Now let's ease into tonight's journey. They love you, or at least the bread subsidies your scribes arranged last month. The royal gardener passes by and bows so deeply he almost falls into the koi pond. You nod, regal and vaguely tired. You smile like you mean it, wave like your wrist isn't cramping, and throw a handful of barley like it's confetti. You close your eyes and let yourself drift for a moment, just a god, pretending to be human, pretending to be a god again. You stride through a hallway lined with murals of your ancestors smiting enemies. She's better at it than your last ambassador was at carrying state secrets. Their painted eyes follow you. Judgingly, you step onto the polished sandstone floors of the palace. Somewhere a lute plays. You close your eyes and pretend not to hear your vizier knocking at the door with more scrolls. Still, the optics aren't ideal, and riding chariots with suspiciously good hair. The expression may also be indigestion. It's hard to tell with ancient sculpture. You start wondering what retirement looks like for a living god. You nod, making sure your gold pectoral necklace doesn't clang against your collarbone like last time. You let your hand drift in the water and think about running away to be a potter, or maybe a cat. You're unsure whether this is symbolic or just impractical. Either way, you nod in approval and assign it to the odd things room. You have 3 of those. 2 attendants hum a hymn to Hathor. Your dignity is asleep on your shoulder. There's an awkward silence while someone translates your greeting into 3 dialects, one of which might just be elaborate coughing. Judging by the stiff smiles in the room, probably both. She's smiling. For a moment, everything is quiet. Emphasis on the latter. It involved running laps, symbolic rebirth, and a costume change or 2. Foreign emissaries were shown grandeur, gifted gold, and occasionally handed royal daughters like decorative scrolls. The idea was to impress and intimidate. Your crown is crooked. You're late for a diplomatic audience, and the foreign dignitaries have been kept waiting with exactly 3 dates and a pitcher of warm beer. You stretch, mutter something that's half a prayer and half a curse, and start moving again. These cones slowly melted in the heat, releasing fragrance and ensuring your perfume outlasted your patience. It's not clear how one communicates surprise without them, but they managed. Your major historical fact. Pharaohs were considered gods on earth, intermediaries between the divine and the dust. That's a lot of pressure for someone whose breakfast options include stale barley bread or more stale barley bread. Either way, your feet hurt. Today's obscure tidbit. Ancient Egyptian pillows were not soft. You pretend not to notice, because frankly, being deified is exhausting and you haven't had your honey wine yet. You're shuffled into a purification chamber called stone, incense smoke, priests chanting something about Ra and eternity. One accidentally sneezes mid. Historians still debate whether pharaohs genuinely believed their own divinity or just played along to keep the nobility quiet. By midday, you're seated on a golden throne shaped like a lion eating an ottoman. And just as you begin to wonder how many more times someone will say tribute today, a palace cat jumps onto your lap and falls asleep. The sun climbs higher, and with it, so does your irritation. You head toward the ceremony, carried in a litter that squeaks slightly every time the bearers step onto uneven cobblestones. Your historical fact. Many pharaohs were expected to participate in elaborate public rituals like the Set Festival, a rejuvenation ceremony held after 30 years of rule, and then periodically thereafter, to prove they were still fit to lead. Today, a weird cultural gem. Some ancient Egyptian priests shaved every hair off their body to remain ritually pure, including eyebrows. The granary is less majestic than you hoped. It smells like fermenting wheat and someone's forgotten sandals. Still, The people cheer. Someone hands you a carved figurine of the grain goddess. Historians still debate whether the elaborate rituals were deeply believed or more political theater designed to keep laborers and landowners feeling spiritually validated. Back at the palace, you slump onto a stone bench in the courtyard, peeling a fig with one thumbnail. A child giggles nearby. It's your cousin's youngest, currently being trained to walk while balancing a bowl of fruit. The day winds on, filled with prayers, policies, and papyrus complaints. A breeze stirs the palm trees as the sun tilts westward. You wake up on your couch, a stone bench lined with woven papyrus mats after what can only be described as a power nap sponsored by divine fatigue. As Pharaoh, punctuality is more of a suggestion than a requirement. Historical fact of the day. Diplomacy in ancient Egypt wasn't just about treaties and marriages, it was theater. Today's obscure cultural tidbit. Some high-ranking officials wore scented wax cones on their heads during important events. You enter the Hall of Pillars. It's massive, echoing, and just slightly colder than expected. The foreign guests bow. A gift is presented, an ivory giraffe. Historians still debate whether these diplomatic exchanges actually eased tension, or just added new layers of passive-aggressive hospitality. Back in your private chambers, you sink into a bath filled with rose water and regrets. Outside, the sun dips lower, spilling golden light across the palm groves. Evening arrives with all the grace of a drunk scribe. You're summoned to the Temple of Ammon for the nightly offering ritual, a solemn affair involving torches, chanting, and you standing very still while trying not to sneeze on sacred incense. You make your entrance flanked by priests in linen robes so white they practically glow. They carry trays of offerings, honey cakes, lotus flowers, and what you suspect might be roasted duck, though no one confirms this. You nod gravely at each. One ancient melody translated loosely to, "The river is high, so please don't drown." Catchy. Here's your major historical fact. Temples in ancient Egypt weren't just religious centers, they were economic powerhouses, owning land, managing granaries, and employing thousands. As Pharaoh, you're less a guest here and more a CEO doing a surprise site visit. Obscure tidbit. Temple musicians sometimes played instruments made from tortoise shells and cat. Somewhere out there, a farmer thanks you for the flood. Somewhere else, a scribe curses your tax policy. The stone walls tower around you, etched with your predecessors' greatest hits. You run a finger across the worn hieroglyphs and wonder what stories they left out. The palace stones are warm under your feet, the kind of warmth that seeps into your bones and reminds you this kingdom runs on sun, sweat, and questionable accounting. That makes it the third time this week, which is either a scheduling error or someone thinks the gods are especially needy lately. Inside, the room smells of burning myrrh, overripe dates, and ambition. Judging by your fidgeting, the latter seems likely tonight. Skipping a ceremony wasn't just bad manners, it was inviting chaos, pestilence, and political cartoons on clay tablets. The high priest anoints you with oil that smells like a fruit basket and ambition. Historians still debate whether it sounded sacred, or just like a very determined tambourine solo. You wonder, briefly, if it has a better retirement plan than you. A small, ceremonial goat escapes its handler and makes a run for it right through the procession, and the faint smell of yesterday's incense still clinging to your robe. Chaos, fabric flaps, offerings topple. A high priest shouts something about omens. You stifle a laugh, barely. You're beginning to suspect the gods are testing your patience more than your piety. It's gilded, heavy, and guaranteed to make your lower back cry out for divine intervention. There is no word on how well the monkeys handled Caesar, but given court politics, they probably coped better than most governors. Some even had mini chapels on board, in case a quick sacrifice felt urgent still. The court insists, and symbols don't get chiropractic adjustments. He speaks of harmony between gods and men, of balance, and of you being the sun's earthly cousin. You smile politely. The oil drips down your ear. You raise a hand, wave gently, and one trips into the mud. The laughter continues. You're not sure, but it might have winked. The governors trail behind you like expensive shadows, nodding gravely and immediately arguing over who gets to sit closest to the canopies. The monkey, perched beside him, seems alarmingly calm. It's another day of sacred obligations, sand-polished corridors, and trying to look majestic while sweating through your linen tunic. A servant offers you a spritz of myrrh. You nod. It's going to be one of those days. It was Egypt's spiritual epicenter, a place to impress both gods and taxpayers. You disembark stiffly, pausing to stretch your arms like any divinely appointed leader who has just spent 8 hours babysitting grown men in gold-threaded tunics. The temple looms ahead, grand, imposing, and somehow always a little windier than seems necessary. Either way, this one involves grapes, gossip, and at least one or dropped into the river. You say nothing, you just want the breeze, more offerings, another diplomatic dinner, and a ceremonial boat ride down the Nile with 3 governors and one suspiciously seasick vizier. You take your place before the altar. You're supposed to embody mad order, justice, cosmic balance. but you're mostly thinking about figs again. As the chanting rises, so does your sense of mild existential dread. Everyone's watching. Historians still debate whether pharaohs truly felt spiritually moved during these ceremonies or simply endured them like one endures bureaucratic marathons. You eat slowly, your mind elsewhere. After the offering, you walk alone through the outer temple courtyard. Back of the palace, dinner is served on bronze trays: grilled fish, pickled vegetables, and a suspiciously cheerful loaf of bread. From your balcony, the Nile glistens under the moonlight, winding endlessly toward the sea. You sigh. Being divine was easier in theory. By now, the heat has settled on your shoulders like an unwanted royal decree. You're summoned to the Hall of Offerings. Again, here's your major historical fact. Pharaohs were often expected to personally participate in religious rituals to maintain cosmic order. Today's obscure tidbit. Egyptian temple rituals sometimes included music played on seas, shaken by temple priestesses in rhythmic arcs. You kneel before a golden idol while a priest recites a hymn that's 47 lines too long. Behind you, someone sneezes again. Then it happens. Later in your chambers, you're handed a scroll outlining tomorrow's events. You close your eyes. Maybe, if you lie very still, the scroll will quietly vanish. It doesn't. The wind whistles softly through the lattice windows. The goat bleats somewhere in the courtyard. Dawn again, no fanfare. Just the rustle of reeds, the creak of a boat being prepared. Today, you float. The ceremonial Bakia royal boat is carved to resemble a falcon gliding across the Nile. Your historical fact of the day. Pharaohs regularly traveled the Nile for state visits and religious pilgrimages, using elaborately decorated boats that doubled as floating temples. Your obscure tidbit. On some of these river journeys, entertainers were brought along, including dwarfs, dancers, and trained monkeys. You board the bark. The Nile sparkles under the morning light. Papyrus fields wave from the banks, and children run barefoot along the edge, laughing. Halfway through the ride, the vizier turns an unsettling shade of green. Historians still debate whether these boat trips were genuine acts of statecraft or more theatrical retreats meant to keep court tension from exploding into literal swordplay. By sunset, the boat glides back into harbor. The monkey waves goodbye. Tomorrow is a temple dedication, which means speeches, flower throwing, and if tradition holds, awkward chanting in front of an idol with suspiciously googly eyes. You sigh, then smile, then sigh again. The morning haze lingers as you prepare to visit the high temple of Khan. Your barge floats gently along the Nile, surrounded by lotus blossoms and the quiet mutter of priests reciting hymns that sound suspiciously like yesterday's. Major historical fact. Karnak wasn't just one temple, it was a sprawling complex built and expanded over 2,000 years by various pharaohs. Obscure tidbit. Ancient Egyptian barge rides were often elaborately staged. They'd bring along live musicians, incense burners, and professional mourners. In case someone remembered a dead relative, the high priest greets you with a voice so nasal it could summon ibis. He presents a sacred scroll, which turns out to be a list of temple maintenance requests. The sacred roof is leaking again. Nothing like a drumbeat in a wail to lift your spirits. The high priest doesn't blink, though his eye twitches slightly at the mention of budget constraints. You disembark with practiced grace, internally bracing for more bowing, chanting, and hieroglyphic dedication. It takes a moment to realize the pounding isn't in your head, it's the sound of a delegation from Nubia arriving early. Wonderful diplomacy before breakfast. You offer a solemn nod and gesture toward your scribe, who's already scribbling like his life depends on it. The Nubians are already in the greeting hall, fanning themselves politely and trying not to look bored. One pharaoh once sent an entire palace's worth of furniture as a goodwill offering. Talk about delivery fees. The sun is high, and the wind kicks up sand. You sneeze. Everyone pretends not to notice. Everyone exchanges pleasantries that sound nice but mean absolutely nothing. It's a lot of "may the gods bless your cattle and may your enemies stub their toes." But judging by the gift of a solid gold leopard-shaped goblet, these folks mean business. A hoopoe bird lands nearby. Is that good luck? Bad? You shrugged. You'll just say it's prophetic and move on. Historians still debate whether pharaohs actually dictated policy at temples or just nodded while priests ran the show. You thank them graciously and try not to let it slip from your sweaty palm. Diplomacy. 80% charm, 20% pretending your sandals don't squeak. Your cousin, who once tried to marry a statue. You've perfected the divine yet slightly preoccupied expression. The delegation nods solemnly, probably making mental notes to offer bribes to your temple's astrologer. After a long procession and a few awkward libation rituals, note to self: never pour wine with your non-dominant hand again. You return to the barge. You sail back in silence, the Nile glinting beside you, a ribbon of history that just keeps flowing. No matter how many divine mandates you issue, there's a scroll of poetry waiting for you there, praising your eternal wisdom in increasingly creative metaphors. One compares your gaze to a desert falcon and a sunbeam. You snort softly. Not bad. You're jolted awake by a dream about crocodiles and royal headdresses. You throw on your ceremonial collar, trying not to knock over a clay jar filled with dried figs. Major historical fact: Egypt had complex, often tense relations with Nubia marked by war, trade, and the occasional Nubia was rich in gold and soldiers, and pharaohs both feared and admired their southern neighbors. Today's cultural gem: ancient Egyptian diplomacy sometimes involved gift exchanges so extravagant they'd bankrupt a small village. You enter with the required solemnity. The Nubian envoy bows. You nod. Then comes the real talk: border access, trade routes, and a slightly suspicious request to send your cousin to Nubia as a royal guest. You stall with a tale about your dreams being unclear lately, and how the gods must be consulted first. Historians still debate how much influence foreign delegations really had at court, or if they were mostly symbolic. Later, you sit under a palm tree, sipping date wine and rereading a list of favorable omens your advisor just fabricated. As the delegation departs, one of them hands you a small carved lion. You retreat to your private chamber.